First story. Toxic brother-in-law ruins family gatherings and crosses the line with grieving mom, leading to a Christmas fallout and family divide. It's funny how some people can ruin family gatherings without even trying. Unfortunately, my family knows this better than most because of one person, Steve. But before I dive into the chaos, let me give you some context to set the stage. I'm Emma, 36, married to my amazing wife Chloe. Chloe and I have been together for over 15 years, and we've built a wonderful life together. We first met as teenagers, but I was still figuring myself out back then. It wasn't until I came out at 21 that we finally started dating. In 2019, we tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by our loved ones. Fast forward to today, we're proud parents to our 4-year-old son, Liam, whom we adopted under heartbreaking circumstances. Liam's biological mother, Sophie, was Chloe's best friend. Sophie tragically passed away in 2021 from an undiagnosed heart condition. It was a devastating loss for Chloe, who was the one to find Sophie after she didn't respond to calls or messages for hours. Liam had been left crying in his crib, completely unaware that his world had just changed forever. Sophie had no family who could take him in, so we stepped in without hesitation. While Liam knows about Sophie, we've made it our mission to raise him as our own and surround him with all the love and care he deserves. Now let me introduce you to my sister Sarah and her long-term boyfriend, Steve. Sarah is 27 and she's been with Steve 28, or 8 years. Unfortunately, Steve has been a sore spot for our family from the moment we met him. He's the kind of person who prides himself on being brutally honest. But really, he's just an insufferable jerk. His arrogance, rudeness, and utter disregard for anyone else's feelings have alienated pretty much everyone. Somehow, though, he manages to treat Sarah decently, which is the only thing in his favor. My parents, Chloe, and I all have a low tolerance for Steve. My dad, in particular, can't stand him and often avoids engaging with him altogether. Chloe, ever the peacekeeper, usually ignores his comments, though she's been known to deliver the occasional sharp retort when he crosses a line. My mom, on the other hand, tries to maintain peace at all costs, often deflecting or changing the subject when Steve starts one of his tirades. Despite this, Steve's presence is like a dark cloud over every family gathering. Last weekend marked the anniversary of Sophie's passing, a day that's always heavy for Chloe. We visited Sophie's grave with Liam to pay our respects and spent the rest of Saturday quietly at home. Chloe, understandably, was subdued the following day when we attended a family gathering at my parents' house. These get-togethers happen every couple of months, and while they're usually enjoyable, Steve's attendance is always a wild card. At first, things seemed relatively normal. Chloe and my dad stepped outside for a walk so she could clear her head, a routine they've developed over the years whenever she's feeling overwhelmed. But Steve, in his usual fashion, couldn't let this slide. He loudly questioned why they had left and why he hadn't been invited. I explained, as calmly as I could, that Chloe was having a tough time due to Sophie's anniversary. Steve's response? She should have gotten over it by now. The room went silent. My usually reserved grandfather was the first to respond, saying that grief isn't something you just get over. He shared how he still misses his best friend who passed away over 20 years ago. Steve sulked for a bit, but didn't say much more, at least not yet. When Chloe and my dad returned, she seemed to be in better spirits, and we all sat down for lunch. The meal started pleasantly enough, with conversations flowing naturally, but Steve, apparently unable to let a good moment last, decided to make himself the center of attention. He interrupted a conversation between Chloe and my grandfather, growing increasingly annoyed when they didn't include him. Then, out of nowhere, he loudly declared, "This is bullshit. Everyone's always fawning over her because her friend died 3 years ago. Get over it already. We're all sick of hearing about it." Time seemed to freeze. All eyes turned to Chloe, and I braced myself for an explosion. But instead of yelling, Chloe responded with an icy calmness that was more cutting than any outburst could have been. She told Steve that the conversation he interrupted wasn't even about Sophie. They were discussing plans for a Christmas market outing. Then she delivered the knockout punch. She called him a toxic, narcissistic jerk and said he was the reason everyone dreaded family gatherings. She added that Sophie, in her 32 years, had made a more positive impact on the world than Steve ever would, even if he lived to be 150. Finally, she told him that while Sophie's funeral was packed with people who loved her, he'd be lucky if anyone other than Sarah showed up to his. Chloe then left the table and stepped outside. I followed her to make sure she was okay, and shortly after, my dad came out to tell us that he had asked Sarah and Steve to leave. Back inside, Chloe apologized to the rest of the family, feeling guilty for causing a scene. But to everyone except my mom, her words had been long overdue. My dad even joked that it was poetic justice for a lesbian to tell him straight, which lightened the mood considerably. However, the fallout was far from over. The next day, Sarah called me demanding an apology from Chloe. She claimed that if Chloe didn't apologize, they wouldn't attend Christmas. I reminded her that we wouldn't be at Christmas anyway, as it was our year to spend it with Chloe's mom. Sarah then ranted about how Chloe was out of line, but I shut her down, saying I fully supported everything Chloe had said. My dad later informed me that Sarah and Steve had escalated their demands, insisting that Chloe issue a public apology in front of the entire family. This laughable suggestion only solidified everyone's stance. Steve was no longer welcome. Even my typically diplomatic grandparents decided they'd had enough and opted to spend Christmas elsewhere to avoid him. The final straw came when Sarah, in a fit of rage, used homophobic slurs against Chloe and me and called Liam a bastard. That was it for me. I blocked her on all platforms and informed the family that I no longer considered her a part of my life. To my relief, my dad and grandparents supported my decision, though my mom struggled with the idea of cutting Sarah off completely. In the end, my mom made the surprising choice to join us at Chloe's mom's house for Christmas, leaving Sarah and Steve to fend for themselves. It's not the resolution I'd hoped for, but at least this year's holiday will be free of Steve's toxic presence. As for Sarah, she's made her bed, and now she'll have to lie in it. Family dynamics can be messy, but sometimes standing up for what's right means drawing a hard line, even if it breaks your heart in the process. Second story. My family hid a devastating secret from my brother for years. Now I'm terrified he'll find out the truth. When I was younger, I always believed that the hardest thing a family could face was dealing with external issues, financial struggles, health crises, or even loss. But nothing in my life could prepare me for the weight of the secret we've been keeping for years. A secret that I carry alone, day in and day out, hoping, praying that someday it won't come crashing down. I've come to realize that sometimes the toughest challenges aren't the ones you face outside your home, but the ones you keep hidden within its walls. It all started when my sister, just 18 years old and fresh into her first semester of college, found herself pregnant, and not from a relationship. No, this was a one-night mistake that neither she nor anyone else saw coming. But my parents? They had very clear expectations. They told her in no uncertain terms that if she didn't keep the baby, they would disown her. In that moment, it wasn't even about her choice. It was about making sure the family image stayed intact, about avoiding shame, about saving face. My sister didn't have the strength to stand up to them. Not then, so she kept the pregnancy. And before she could even return to finish the semester, my parents made it clear they would raise the child as their own. Our younger brother. I remember the day my sister pretended to have mono so she could avoid her spring semester. It was a clever cover, but one that still felt wrong. Then, the summer came, and she gave birth to a baby boy. My parents adopted him immediately, and we made a quiet but swift move, leaving behind everything, including my aunt and uncle, cutting off the people who might have known the truth. From that moment on, the story of how our younger brother came into our lives was written by my parents, and we were all expected to follow the script. His birth was nothing but a footnote in a carefully constructed narrative. We never spoke about it again. But here I am, years later, feeling the unbearable weight of what we've done. The guilt is suffocating. There are days when it's so hard to breathe. My younger brother, he doesn't know. He thinks we're just his family, and that's the hardest part. He doesn't understand why I've always had this discomfort around his story. He cracks jokes, teasing me about how much of an accident he was, and I laugh. I laugh, even though inside I'm breaking. He's asked me directly how I felt when Mom got pregnant, and I looked him in the eye and lied, because what else could I do? It's the little things that get to me. The tiny moments where I can't keep the truth buried anymore. I remember the first time he asked me how I felt about the pregnancy, about the baby. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything, but I couldn't. Instead, I lied. And every time I do, I feel more and more like a fraud. I wonder if he'll ever see through it. But what truly chills me to the bone is how everyone in my family seems completely fine with this. My sister, who I know has her own burden to bear, has built a life, gotten married, and just recently shared her joy about expecting her first child on Instagram. My mom is so proud of my younger brother, gushing about him online, bragging that he's her first grandchild. She's never mentioned her other grandchild, the one we never talk about. My dad? He has a whole new story about how he had concerns over my mother's age when she was pregnant with my brother, but in the end, he got the son he always wanted. It's all lies, carefully constructed lies, and I can't tell if it bothers them like it bothers me, or if I'm the only one still carrying this burden. It's one of the hardest things to live with, knowing the truth and pretending it's not there. My sister never told her husband the truth either, and I don't even know how she carries that weight. Sometimes I wonder, is it better to keep the secret, or is it worse to let it fester? I'll never say anything, not ever. But the fear that someday, somehow, the truth will come out haunts me. Maybe it'll be something small, a mistake in the paperwork, a slip-up when he does something like take an ancestry test. Maybe he'll find out on his own. Maybe it'll be the birth certificate that finally gets unsealed. I don't know, but it terrifies me. And it terrifies me for him. That poor boy. The very people who were supposed to love and protect him have lied to him his entire life. I can't help but feel the crushing guilt of knowing I was complicit in all of this. When that day comes, and I know it will, I won't know how to face him. How do you explain that to someone? How do you tell the person you've loved like your own child that everything they thought was true about their family is a lie? There are moments when I wish the truth would come out, just so the burden would be lifted. But then I think of how he would feel when he finds out. How betrayed he would feel. How could I live with myself, knowing I'd been part of this? It's so much easier to keep the secret, but it's killing me inside. I wish I could say that I don't regret it, but I do. Every single day. The hardest part is that I'm not sure if it's better for him to know or not. Does he deserve the truth, even if it destroys everything he believes about his family? Or is it kinder to let him live in the world we've built for him, with all its lies and false narratives? I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know one thing. My heart breaks a little more every time I have to lie to him. Every time I tell him everything is fine, when it's anything but. I just hope that one day, if he ever does find out, he can understand why we did it. Because the truth is, we were just scared. Scared of what would happen if he knew. But now I'm terrified of what will happen when he finally does. Third story. I found my sister-in-law kissing another man just 7 months after my brother's death. Now I'm struggling with my decision to distance myself from her and the kids. About 7 months ago, my world was turned upside down when my brother suddenly passed away. He left behind his wife, his 10-year-old son, and his 8-year-old daughter, my niece and nephew. My brother and I had always been incredibly close, and I was just as close to his kids. So when he passed, I was determined to step up and support his family in every way I could. My priority was to help my niece and nephew navigate this devastating time while also being there for my sister-in-law, who was inconsolable. I spent countless hours with them, trying to fill the gap my brother left behind. We would watch movies, play games, and just talk. I thought that, together, we would all heal in time. But things began to change in ways I didn't expect. One afternoon, I was on my way to my sister-in-law's house when I saw something that made my heart sink. As I pulled up to the driveway, I saw her kissing a man. Someone I'd never seen before, right as he was dropping her off. I was frozen in place. Of course, I knew my sister-in-law was grieving, but seeing her with someone else so soon was a shock to my system. When she noticed me, she seemed embarrassed, but quickly explained. She told me she'd met him a couple of weeks ago on a dating app, and they'd been seeing each other since. At first, I didn't know how to respond. I tried not to judge her too harshly. I understood that people cope with grief in their own ways. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that my brother's memory was being replaced too quickly, and it felt like a betrayal to everything he meant to our family. In the days that followed, I started to pull away. I stopped visiting her and the kids, which was something I had always done to try and help them through their grief. I couldn't stand the thought of being around her while she was dating someone else so soon after my brother's death. It made me feel like the memory of him was fading in a way I wasn't ready for. My sister-in-law reached out several times, asking why I wasn't coming over anymore. She said the kids missed me, and that she would stop seeing the guy if it meant I would come back and spend time with them. She was clearly upset, but I told her the truth. It wasn't about her dating. She could move on whenever she felt ready and with whoever she wanted. But for me, I needed space. I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine when I still felt overwhelmed with grief. I told her I couldn't be there anymore until I processed my own emotions. I didn't want to hurt her or the kids, but I just couldn't continue acting like things were normal. It was too much for me to handle. Now, I'm stuck wondering if I made the right choice. Was I too harsh? Am I wrong for needing this space, even if it means disappointing my niece and nephew? I never wanted to hurt them, but I don't know how to keep going without dealing with my own pain first. So, am I the a-hole for distancing myself from my sister-in-law and her kids during their time of need? Should I have been more understanding of her need to move on, or was my reaction justified?